This reading today is what is known as the Messianic secret. There are other parts in Mark in which Jesus also says, who do you believe that I am? And when they say the Messiah, he says, don't tell anybody just yet. And the reasoning for Jesus saying that has been debated over time. And there's a whole bunch. You remember I talked to you last week about interpreting the Bible and not knowing for sure what the true answer is. And so whatever it is, whichever way you interpret it is the truth to you. And there are many different interpretations that we can consider, and one always speaks to us the most. For this particular reading, there are explanations for that, such as Jesus didn't really say that. It's a translation issue. Maybe that is. I don't speak Aramaic or Greek. I took biblical Hebrew, but I don't speak that either. I got a good grade. There are other explanations, one of which was widely accepted in the beginning of the 20th century, which was that it's tied with the idea that Mark's gospel was written first before the other two synoptic gospels of Matthew and Luke. And the reason why they think that is because Matthew and Luke don't have a whole lot of things in common, but they each have a lot of things in common with Mark. So it's evident to some that Mark was used in writing Matthew and Luke, along with another source, which is called the Q source, which is it's not complicated, this idea that there's another source that was used to write the Gospels, but we have never seen it. And so some people believe in the Q source, some people don't. But that's not here or there. That's theological stuff that drives me crazy. So the idea is that this idea of the Messianic secret was in order to reconcile the ideas of the early church as far as Jesus being the Messiah with the non-Messianic aspects of Jesus' ministry. So they wanted to put them together in the early church. And so this whole idea of let's keep it a secret. And so that's why Jesus' ministry looked the way it did in the beginning. There's another explanation, which is the one I ascribe to and one that really speaks to me, especially within living out our ministries in the church. There's a possibility that Jesus didn't want people to know that he was the Messiah just yet, because up to that point, his ministry looked very benign, very uplifting, very positive, in the sense that he was healing, and he was doing a whole bunch of wonderful things for the community. They were going around, they were preaching, they were healing the sick and releasing demons from those who were possessed, all sorts of things that were absolutely wonderful. But they didn't have the whole story yet about what was going to happen. They didn't know that there was suffering coming to Jesus. I want to remind you all that the Jews were expecting a liberator. Their Messiah was going to be this strong Messiah that was going to come. I mean, I just imagine him in a white horse with, armament and a big sword to liberate the Jewish people from Roman oppression that they had been under for centuries. But here we had this Jesus who was born in a simple manger to a poor family, who was roaming the countryside preaching the good news of God, who was not anybody who was rich, was not particularly powerful. And that didn't coincide with the idea that they had of a strong Messiah. So Jesus didn't want that idea of a very positive, very uplifting, very benign ministry to be the only thing that defined the Messiah, because he knew that the whole thing was going to come as a huge shock to everybody. The idea that the liberator was going to liberate us not by war, but by death. By death on a cross, by suffering. And so he held that until they had a bigger picture. Now we have a bigger picture. We get this story 2,000 years later, 2,000 plus years later. So we know what happens, right? We know exactly the suffering that Jesus is going to go through. We know that all the wonderful things that he did in his ministry were also combined with the bad things that came with his death on the cross and the suffering. Now, how does that apply to us in our lives today? If we live by Jesus' example, if we decide that we're going to follow the path of Christ, then we must know that there's going to be suffering accompanied with that. He never promised that following him would be easy. On the contrary, it's going to be very difficult. Thankfully, in this country, we don't have to be worried about being killed on the streets because we announce that we believe in Christ, that we're Christians. We don't have to worry about that. But there are parts in this world where that is still an issue. If you don't know that, there are people still being crucified for being Christian. Somewhere in this world. Thankfully, that is not our problem. We live in a country that provides us with the freedom to worship in whichever way that we want to worship, without fear of violence or oppression. But our being Christians is still difficult for us. We still have to make choices in our lives to follow Christ, to do the difficult thing. The easy thing is for us to just think about ourselves, to live a life where the only important thing is ourselves. I don't want to go hang out with this community over there. Why? I can go do that at home. How many times have you had a conversation with somebody and said, I can't go because I got to go to church tomorrow, I got to wake up early? And they say, you go to church? Every week? For real? I can imagine our acolytes, as I was watching them process, I thought to myself, I bet you their friends don't know they go to church and wear a dress and carry candles around, do they? As a matter of fact, one of the things that happened yesterday, yesterday was a long work day, so I was wearing my clericals, which I don't like to wear very often, but I had to because there was a memorial service yesterday, and so I got here for a meeting at 10:30 in the morning, and I already had it on, and I had my clericals on till like 8 o'clock at night, and I don't usually do that. But somewhere in the midst of my day, I called my husband and I said, let's go have lunch. And he comes over, he picks me up, we went to lunch at Panera, and I walk in. Now, I want you to picture this. So I'm wearing my clericals. My husband, on the other hand, is wearing a pair of cargo shorts, a pair of flip-flops, and a t-shirt that says, Puerto Rico, no bad days, right? So we walk into Panera, and he always does this. Obviously, he opens the door for me, right? But he stays like a few steps behind because he likes to watch people when they see me for the first time, right? So you got people sitting at their tables eating, and all of a sudden you see them like stop halfway. What was that? Now, I don't like wearing clericals, not because I get so much attention, but because it's my opinion that clericals were made for skinny priests. And those of us, I won't say anything else, those of us who are not skinny priests should not be wearing something here. But the fact is that when I do wear it, it causes people to stop where they are. I get attention for it. I would much rather be able to walk into Panera and sit down and have my meal without the whole place turning around to look at me, right? I would much rather prefer that. As a matter of fact, I had a conversation with my priest when I was just about to be ordained a deacon, And everybody in seminary was so excited about wearing clericals, and I just could not get excited. And so I asked my priest, I said, so when is it that I've got to wear this thing, right? And she says to me, well, I always wear it, obviously, when I'm working, right? Obviously, I didn't follow her lead, but she wore it all the time when she was working, and if she had a diocesan meeting, or if anything that had to do with her work, she'd wear her clericals. And then, I said, and she says, the only other time that I used it when I wasn't working is when I was traveling. And I said, why would you wear that when you're traveling? I'd much rather be on an airplane in my pajamas. And she said to me, well, the thing is that the airport is where you're going to get the most attention. The most amount of people at one time are going to see you at an airport. And I need for children and women, or little girls and women, to know that that is a possibility. Because still in this world, everyone is not aware that that is a possibility. And I thought, wow, what a wonderful idea. Until I went to the airport the very first time with my clericals. Oh, Christ, I had like a confession line down the aisle of the airplane. It's a difficult position to be in. You can't, if you're in your car, or if I'm in my car wearing my clericals, I can't cuss somebody because they got in front of me. I got to just say, it's a different, you can't be yourself even in the most intimate moments, because somebody is watching. Somebody is watching, and we're held to such a higher standard. But it's the path that I decided to take. When I went to seminary, it's 3 years of a graduate degree. It's a master's degree that takes 3 years. All the others take 2 years, except for a law degree, right? I could have been a lawyer and made a whole lot more money and spend the same amount of time in school. But I chose this because this is the path that Christ has put in front of me. It may be more difficult, but it's the one that's in front of me. And I think the rest of you know that too, that when you choose to live good lives, you choose to minister to the people that you do, because I know that all of you do. This church is big on that. And you put yourself aside. You could have days off. You could stay in bed in your pajamas and your slippers and hang out, but instead we choose to go out and we feed the homeless, and we tend to people who are sick. We do all those things even though it's not as easy as it may seem. You know, and we have like Jesus, the devil behind us, right? So we have to, at times we have to answer like Jesus does, you know, Satan, get behind me, right? When we're tempted not to do those things that we should be doing. Now, at one time I had this conversation again with the same priest, and I asked her, or actually she asked me, this is before going to seminary. She says to me, do you believe that the devil is a being, like with horns and a pitchfork? And I said, well, I wouldn't go as far as the horns and the pitchfork, but yes, I believe that the devil is a being, right? And she said, okay, I just wanted to know your answer. And I went home. And that stuck with me, and I thought about it for like 3 or 4 days. And I came back to her and I said to her, can I change my answer? She says, well, it wasn't a test, but go ahead. I said, well, nobody had ever asked me that question. I had never really thought about that. And I said, no, I don't think that the devil is a being. I think that it's that little voice inside of us that tells us that we can be doing things for our own benefit instead of for others. And we all have that little voice inside of us. We all have the potential for evil at some point in time. And sometimes we fall into it. We have to be the ones to say, Satan, get behind me, because this is the path that I have in front of me, and this is the one that I'm going to follow. Whether or not we fall off of it every once in a while is besides the point. We're going in the general direction, right? This is how we live out our lives. And especially in this church where we're going through a difficult time. We've been going through a difficult time for 4 months. And we've been asking you for a few weeks to pray for our vestry, because I want you to think about it this way. We've got a group of people who have taken on a responsibility to be our leaders in this place, to make decisions for the body as a whole. And sometimes those decisions are popular and sometimes they're not. And yet those people who could have at any point in time during their service said, you know what, this is too difficult for me. I really don't want to do this. I'd rather come into church, sit in the back pew, do my thing, and when service is over, get out of here. But they didn't. Not one of them during this difficult time has decided to bail on us. Not one. And they know that when a decision is made, or when decisions are made, that they may not be popular with the rest of the church, and they may get flack for it. But they decided to walk that path, to walk the path that Christ has put in front of them. And we do that. Everyone in here does the same thing, especially during this time, because any one of you could have walked out of here. Any one of you could have said, you know what? I want to be a part of a church that doesn't have all this drama. Although I will say a little caveat here, that doesn't exist. Every church has drama. So if you had that idea, forget about it. But you could have said, you know what? I'm going to stop coming to this place because it's getting difficult, because I'm not in agreement with the people that are here. And I'm going to get going. I'm going to go to the one down the street. And they don't know me. So I can just sit in the back pew and not talk to anybody, do what I got to do, worship the Lord, receive communion, hear the sermon, and go home. But we chose not to do that. We chose to be here. Not because it's for our own benefit, but because it's for the benefit of the community. These are the kinds of decisions that we make every day. We may not get killed for our decisions in this country. But we're going to make decisions that are maybe not even in our best interest. Because we love one another. Because we are called to love one another in this world. And I'm going to say it for let me not say one last time. One last time today. And I'm not going to feel bad about it. I promise. Jesus reminds us on every occasion, love your God with all your heart, all your mind, and all your soul, and love your neighbor as yourself. And we've been doing that. It's difficult, but let's continue to do that and to walk the path that Jesus has put in front of us, always with love. Amen.